Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's your boy Skip, aka Skip and Tosh here, back with late breaking news from the Sacktown breakdown. Luke Walton is fired. Ding dong. The Luke is fried. And this one I couldn't tackle alone, so I had to bring my main man. If y'all been following me around from like the old NBA podcast, Be Clear Radio, No Hezzy, and all of that stuff, and you'll probably know my man Schwab, aka J.R. Schwab, aka Future Schwabito. What's up, Schwab?
Swabito.
How you
What's up,
doing, man?
everybody? I'm good. I'm good, Kurt. How you doing? Skip, excuse me. I always mess that up. You always be Kurt to me.
Hey, that's how it should be. You know me since before the skip days. But man, I'm doing good, man. This is a very interesting day in Sacramento Kings history. There's a lot of implications. I don't want to call it a great day because we should all know better than that. But before we get into that talk, just wanted to remind everybody. I know we're getting close to the holiday season, and people are gifting gifts and possibly asking for gifts and got wish lists and all that other good stuff. So remember, we got Tabu Ohana. Fantastic gaming chairs, leather, local company if you're in Sacramento, California. Up to 45% off select chairs right now. But if you put in the discount code SKIPTC, SKIPTC, you'll get another $40 off of your order. So I mean, I don't even know how big of a discount that is, but that's pretty big. So again, if you are looking for even an office chair, all black leather looks good in the boardroom too. Or if you're looking to gift a chair to a gamer in your life, or just get one for yourself, elevate your gaming comfort. Sit in the lap of luxury, literally, with Tabu Ohana gaming chairs. TABUOHANA.com. Don't apologize. Just be yourself. Schwab, we've been ourselves for a long time. Ourselves involves being lovers of pain, torture, disappointment.
The masochistic tendencies is what I like to say.
We love pain here at Sacramento Kings fans, but today Luke Walton officially got the axe as a Sacramento Kings head coach. Schwab, I need from someone who's been a Kings fan through and through since way before this, like many of the listeners. Like, how does this news hit you today when you first heard it?
It's funny because like over the years of being a Kings fan, there's always like that one thing with the team that like you can tell like, oh, we need this, or oh, we need that, or oh, like we're just missing this, or they're just still too young and everything. And I think we all have never wanted to use the coach as the scapegoat in these instances because it's not always about the coach. Like a lot of times it is about what you have on the floor. But as I was talking to another buddy the other day, and we were going over this roster and going over this team, and we kept coming back to the only thing that we could see being wrong with this squad right now was the coaching. And I think this needed to be happening at the beginning of the season when we got our new general manager because I am firmly under the impression and under the thinking of a general manager should pick his own coach. That way there's no bickering, there's no I want to do this philosophy and the coach wants to do this philosophy. They're on the same page, everybody's working together. This wasn't one of those cases, and I think it's a little delayed in my book. Like I said, it should have been at the beginning of the season, but I'm happy it's happened now. One of the main things with Luke Walton, and we were talking about this earlier, just kind of going over things, his time with the Warriors and what he's done. Luke Walton is a player's coach. This Kings team does not need a player's coach. They need a tactician. They need someone to lead them to a player's coach is somebody that has the stars already there. And I know I'm kind of taking this over right now, but like
Oh
this
no,
is the
go
one
for
thing
it.
I
Go
want
for it.
everybody to know. The player's coach has the stars. They don't need to be coached per se. They are they're more just like a guider a guider of the players. If the players need help, with certain things, they go to the coach. We've all seen it, over the years. These players, coaches. The Kings team right now, as constructed, needs a coach. They need that guy to come in and actually lead the team. Oddly enough, I think their interim head coach they have right now that Luke Walton is fired, and Alvin Gentry is a great example of a tactician coach, a guy that is there to run the plays and do everything like that. I think it's a great move. I think it was time for that move. And Luke Walton, don't let the door hit you on the way out, bud. I mean, at this point, it's done and over with, and we're moving on. So I think overall, it's a good thing for the Kings right now that we're making a coaching change. So
Absolutely. No, I'm with you. We've seen, what Luke can do. He's put it on full display, and it falls well short of what is required for this Kings team to start turning things around, to start understanding and learning what winning is going to take in order for us fans who are more than deserving to start reaping the benefits of all the money and time and hours and whatnot, and money on merchandise and tickets and season tickets and all that stuff that we've spent, in regards to the Sacramento Kings keeping this franchise, a turning. Now, I have some questions related to you. Talk about Luke Walton a little bit more. We've got a brief overview of, what he isn't, what he is. But, you kind of talked about his time in Golden State a little bit. Let's kind of remind people of kind of what got him here. So, oddly enough, before Luke Walton took the associate head coach of the Golden State Warriors, that's where Alvin Gentry was. We'll put a pin in that, and we'll return to that. So Alvin Gentry, after the Warriors have some success, gets offered a head coaching gig down in New Orleans for the New Orleans Pelicans. Luke Walton, steps up in that role and is asked to take that position. And this year, the Golden State Warriors had just finished getting beat by the Cleveland Cavaliers in that championship series. Draymond Green hops on the phone with a specific player, tells him we need him there. Who ends up coming to the Golden State Warriors right as Luke Walton is taking on that associate head coaching role?
you get the second best player in the NBA at the time, Kevin Durant.
So Kevin Durant comes to the Golden State Warriors. Harrison Barnes, who wanted to stay with the team, obviously they're not going to try to re-sign him. So he goes to the Dallas Mavericks. He signs his max deal over there, and he goes about his way. KD fills that slot after Harrison Barnes has a pretty pathetic showing ultimately within the Golden State Warriors. Partially the reason why Draymond Green got on the phone, because Harrison Barnes wasn't getting the job done there. We'll put a pin in that too. He's got a whole journey story too. But we get there, season starts, pretty much looking like this roster is set up to potentially challenge the Chicago Bulls to have the best record in the history of the NBA, the National Basketball Association. And as the season gets going, we have some health issues that occur with Steve Kerr. Tell me a little bit more about what happened with Steve Kerr and then how that impacted Luke Walton.
So basically, Steve Kerr had some back issues. Couldn't be out on the court. Basically, just couldn't be standing and sitting constantly for the 3-4 hours of games and everything like that. So, just like you would with any team, the associate head coach or the top assistant takes over, and that ends up being Luke Walton. Which, in any other world, I feel like any other coach could have possibly done what Luke Walton was about to do, and maybe not certain little things, but I think here's the thing: this Warriors team went on was it 36-4 was the run they went on. So
Yeah.
36-4 is just an astronomical streak. I mean, not even full streak, but just an astronomical 40 games for any sport. Even to go 36-4 is just incredible. Let alone basketball, where we haven't seen something like that since 98, 97,
So,
whatever the Jordan years was when they went 72-10. So we had never really seen anything like that. The problem that comes from this is that Luke Walton was nothing more for that team than a cheerleader almost. And I don't mean that in a super negative way. I just mean that as more of like he was just more there to he was just there to kind of hey guys, let's go, we can do this better. Like, he wasn't telling them how to play the game. These 5 guys that are on the court are all possible Hall of Famers or potential Hall of Famers. They know how to play the game of basketball. They don't need Luke Walton to show them exactly what to be doing on the floor. Like I said, anybody probably could have come in and went 36-4 with this team of Steph Curry, Draymond Green, Klay Thompson, Kevin Durant, and was Andre Iguodala there? I think he was.
Iggy was still there.
Iggy was there, and he was the main one playing. But they would cycle through centers, whoever was going to play center that night for them. Like I said, I think almost anybody could have done the job that Luke Walton did. Maybe not to the effect that he did, but I don't think they didn't go 36-4 because of Luke Walton's coaching. Let's be very clear about that. Let's throw it back and say that they didn't go 36-4 because of his coaching. From that, we saw Luke Walton get a future position with the Los Angeles Lakers, and I don't know. I'm getting ahead of myself right now, but like we never really saw anything, from even what he did with the Lakers that showed us that like Luke Walton was that coach, or could potentially take a different team 36-4 and replicate what he did with the Warriors. It's funny, we've always joked around with our owner, Vivek. Vivek always wanted to be what I always say, the Warriors light, or the Warriors just up the road. Like he always wanted to create that new Warriors. And so it always felt like, to me, signing Luke Walton was Vivek Ranadive trying to recapture that little bit of magic that he felt when he was a partial or a minority owner with the Golden State Warriors all those years ago when the streak happened and the 36-4 happened and Luke Walton was there. I mean, we've seen multiple people from the Golden State Warriors front office now come through our own front office, whether it be head coach or special advisor role or whatever it may be. So I think it's we can't slight that. We've always known that our owners always tried to make us as the Warriors light. But I don't think for what, like I mentioned earlier about like a player's coach or everything, I don't think what Luke Walton, there was a small percentage chance that we were going to replicate that success with Luke Walton. I'll never say never, but there was a very small percentage chance that we were able to do that. Obviously, it went the way that everyone expected it to go, and oddly enough, let me say this. Now, I wanted to challenge you real quick. Since Rick Adelman has been there, we've had a lot of head coaches for the Sacramento Kings. Do you know who the winningest head coach is in that time since Rick Adelman?
Luke Walton.
Luke Walton, oddly enough. But it comes down to, like I was saying earlier, our roster is constructed differently and our roster is constructed better to the point where we need better results. And especially when, having even talked about, an ex-coach, but Dave Yeager had a winning season or close to a winning season for the Kings, the best season we'd had in years. And we let him go to now bring in somebody who has underperformed from what those previous seasons were with a different head coach. At the end of the day, it was time for this to happen. It was time to move on. I don't know if replicating. I know you were talking about Alvin Gentry. It was weird putting a pin. I'm going to put a pin in this. Alvin Gentry is now the interim head coach. He's following. It's almost like they flip flop positions. One took over for the other. And it's gonna be funny if Luke Walton goes and gets a job somewhere else now. It's an interesting situation. I'm more delightful that the Kings, like, I'm trying to forget about the past. Like, I'm more looking to the future and like what we could do, with a different coach, with this same roster. And I'm hoping it's better. I could be completely wrong, and we just classic Kings, Stockholm syndrome, and we actually aren't as good as we think we are, But I'm definitely interested for the future and what this all brings to us,
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's to be said that anybody will be better than Luke Walton, but how much better is the question. And we'll definitely get to that part in a second. I want to go back to something. So we were talking about Luke Walton. We were talking about the 36-4 within the span of the 40 games. So of course, as you mentioned, Steve Kerr was having some issues with his spine, ended up having to go and get a procedure. Luke Walton takes over for a little bit. He comes back. There seemed to be like a leak with the procedure of spinal fluid, so he has to go back out again. Luke Walton is the interim head coach for that experienced amount of time. They go 36-4. Steve Kerr comes back. I want to remind everyone that there was a period of time as we were getting to the close of the season, and it was very apparent that that the Warriors were chasing that 72-10 record for the Bulls, and just may end up eclipsing them, which was really fun. I remember games where, sometimes they'd be down and people be like, oh, the streak is not going to happen, or the record is not going to be broken. And they do some crazy flurry of 3-pointers between, all four of the, main starters, and then get back in the game and end up winning. And they had some close calls. There's a few close shaves in there. But I remember getting to the end of that season. I remember the season closing, they break the record, and then there was this question of who should get the Coach of the Year award. Should it be Steve Kerr, who missed, I think it was a little less than half the season, or should it be Luke Walton getting the Coach of the Year award? Do you remember that time, Schwab?
I do, because numbers-wise, if you look strictly at the numbers, I think Steve Kerr actually had a worse percentage. They did beat the record. They ended up 73-9, if my math is correct. It is 73. Yep. And then I think he was 30, or he was like 40 something and 5. I can't remember what it was, but the percentage was slightly worse than Luke Walton, and there was that serious conversation. I was always a subscriber to whoever the head coach is. That's the head coach. That's the one that got you there, because that's the one that prepared you to get to that point. We talked about Luke Walton being the associate head coach or whatever. All the associate head coach is there for is when the head coach can't do it, or when you need a little something extra, that guy steps up to the plate. You know what I mean? I think it also comes down to who do you think is the better coach overall, in right. the grand scheme of things. And I'm taking Steve Kerr over Luke Walton any day of the week. I think Steve Kerr has proven that now. Obviously, hindsight, years later, we've seen he's obviously the better coach overall. But it was definitely interesting, and that was the media narrative of who should be getting this award. When I always saw him as like he was the cheerleader on the sidelines. Like, he didn't really have that much to like get them. Steve Kerr did more coaching than what Luke Walton was doing. Yep. Luke Walton was, I think, only a year or two removed from playing. He had just retired, very, very, prior, like very earlier prior to, becoming that assistant head coach for the Warriors. I think that assistant head coach job was his first assistant or any coaching job he had. He might have been somewhere else, but I'm pretty sure the Warriors was his first position. And so I definitely think Steve Kerr should have been, and rightfully was, the winner of that Coach of the Year award that year. But I did think it was funny that everyone was trying to give that award to Luke Walton just for those 40 games, where those players were already ready to go, primed and ready to go that whole time.
Exactly. Yeah, that was really interesting. So yeah, sure enough, Luke Walton looks like he retired in 2013. And oh wait, no, that's interesting. Hold on, wait. Playing career, it says 2003 to 2013, but coaching career, it says 2011 to present. So that's interesting. Okay. But
so it's funny. It's funny that I'm reading this now too. This was during the lockout season, and there was a lot of guys that did random things, and I completely forgot he went back to Memphis.
That's right.
He worked under, I want to say this was before basketball coach for Kentucky right now, John Calipari. I think this might have been before John Cal moved to Kentucky. I think he was still at Memphis, and I think that's why Luke Walton went there to go work under John Calipari for a season. I would have to look that up and verify that, but I believe that's what it was. Ended up basketball started again. He came back to basketball right away, so he was only assistant coach for a couple months. But his first actual NBA job was with the Warriors. So it's
Yeah.
interesting to see that he had no other head coaching or even assistant coaching experience other than that a couple months at Memphis.
Yeah, and it looks like there was some time with the Los Angeles Defenders,
Mm-hmm.
who they were at the time, and he was a player development coach
Yep.
for from 2013 to 2014, and then right after that, yep, he goes to the Warriors. He is an assistant coach there, and from 2014, and then it was I believe it was the 2015 2016 season. That's when he took the associate head coaching gig. So not a lot of experience coaching, period. Not even a lot of experience to be asked to be an associate head coach. But nonetheless, that's where he found himself. And sure enough, all of those questions about who should be the coach of the year came up. Ultimately, they ended up going, like you said, they gave it to Steve Kerr. I think it might have been something within the coaches collective bargaining agreement too, stating that like
I'm reading right now. It actually says that they. So it says because of the NBA rules. I'm paraphrasing right now. Because of the NBA rules, they only allow. The rules stipulate that the team's record under an interim coach be credited to the head coach. So even though Luke Walton was the one that the 24-0 streak, I think that was the other thing. They broke the Rockets' 20-game win streak or 21-game win streak.
right.
They had 24-game win streak, but like you said, I think it might be a CBA agreement thing that it has to go under the head coach's coaching record and not the interim coach. Because technically, he is only an associate or an interim head coach. It's not an actual, he is the head coach.
Exactly. Almost similar to the whole thing going on right now with like, the president needing medical procedures. So it has to pass over the power of the presidency to the vice president. Very similar thing. Steve Kerr had to go under, for a medical procedure, had to take a leave. So it got passed over. But the person's watch that these things happened under is Steve Kerr. It was his offense that they were running. It was his defense that was installed. Therefore, and then under the agreement and the rules, it gets credited to Steve Kerr.
It's funny. I'm reading another quote from Luke Walton right now. The only reason why he was even brought on as an assistant was, and I quote, "We are," he's talking about the Warriors. "We are going to run parts of the triangle offense, and I know that thing front and back." So I think Steve Kerr's offense, obviously, I mean, Luke Walton's been running the triangle his entire career for the Lakers. He knows it probably, besides Kobe, is probably the number one guy to know the triangle offense, and players,
He definitely sat on the bench long enough to really study it.
I mean, he definitely did, and he definitely knows it. I know he's still close, or at least talks to Phil Jackson, and with about stuff like that. But it's interesting to see that like the Steve Kerr was implementing parts of the triangle into his offense with these players. And when you really think about it, like they do run, or at least back then they were running parts of the triangle, but parts of the triangle have that pickup basketball mentality too, where it's a lot of the screens and a lot of the high posts and just random things like that, where it's like a lot of those things are implemented in what we always talked about the new NBA, where it was either the 3-pointers or the layups and everything. So it's interesting to see Luke Walton get, this position because of that triangle offense that he ran for so many years.
Absolutely. And oddly enough, who's someone else who knew the triangle very well because he had run it during his time under, oh gosh, well, I almost said Steve Kerr, but under Phil Jackson
Yeah.
in Chicago, it was Steve Kerr.
Mm-hmm.
So Steve Kerr taking bits and pieces from Phil Jackson's offense, and then Luke Walton knowing it so intimately because he was also coached by Phil Jackson with the Los Angeles Lakers, and then bringing him on simply because he knows that offense very well. He has a teensy tiny little bit of coaching experience, and He sat on the bench long enough to in order to in order to study it so well. Now, that wasn't the only offense that the Golden State Warriors ran. I would like to go on record as saying, and it is already well documented, that the other offense that they adopted in addition to the triangle was the Princeton offense, which I believe it's Steve Carroll. I don't remember if it's Steve. Yeah, Steve Carroll, who came up
Pete
with that
Carroll.
in this. Pete Carroll. That's right,
Yep.
Pete. I always forget it was Peter because I always think of Pete Carroll from the
Yeah,
Seattle Seahawks.
exactly.
But it's a different coach, and he developed that offense in his time coaching for Princeton. When Rick Adelman was hired, his first year of being hired here in Sacramento, California, as our head coach, one of the first people that he hired was Pete Carroll, directly from Princeton, because Adelman wanted to run the Princeton offense at the NBA level. So that beautiful offense with all those ball screens and cuts and beautiful ball movement and the best show on court and all that stuff that everybody was enjoying at the pinnacle of the Sacramento Kings success was actually the Princeton offense. And the Golden and Steve Kerr wanted that freedom of ball movement and player movement, so he adopted that as well. So Warriors fans, you're welcome. Part of what you're enjoying is actually what the Kings are already running circa 2000, 2001.
It's funny.
Uh,
The
mhm.
Princeton offense to me is kind of like in football. You always hear them talk about the West Coast offense. It was an
Right.
old offense from the Niners back in the '80s. They would run this
Mhm.
pound the ball, pound the ball, pound the ball to open up the passing game and everything.
Yep.
And where this is the same sort of thing when you really think about it. It's the screen. You're passing and you're screening to get the best opportunity, the best shot. You'll always have, as long as you pass the ball and look for those screens and everything, there will always be a better shot or a more open shot. You know what I mean? And so
Yep.
it's interesting to see like all these new offenses and everything have taken bits of the West Coast offense in football, but even nowadays, like Utah Jazz run a modified Princeton offense
Yeah.
right now. It's probably the main. The Spurs used to be one of the main teams running bits of the Princeton offense with the passing and the screening and Tony Parker handling the ball and running that pick and roll game with Tim Duncan.
Yep.
Whereas nowadays the Jazz are kind of not the only team. There is other teams that run versions of it, but the Jazz are a main team that run like a version of that Princeton offense where it's all about ball screens, all about getting better open looks and things like that.
And oddly enough, with defense, they finished with the best record in the NBA last season. So, but that offense got introduced to the NBA through the Sacramento Kings. So, thank you, Pete Carroll, and thank you, Rick Adelman. But we are in darker days. So, here we are, Luke Walton being considered as potential coach of the year. The conversation is proliferating more so because talking heads on ESPN and other shows need something to talk about, and of course they want to rock the boat with their take. So that's what is considered now. Ultimately, of course, like we've already said, it goes to Steve Kerr. That's that. But of course, Luke Walton gets offered positions because of what happened while he was the interim head coach. So he moseys himself right back home down to Los Angeles to the Los Angeles Lakers. Now, Schwab and I have very interesting relations. Our best friends happen to be Lakers fans,
Unfortunately.
unfortunately. So it's a strange juxtaposition. In a way, we were prophets of this downfall because and I know things may have been a little different or may have been similar over in Schwab's household with his best friend or Black Mo. Shout out to Black Mo from No Hezzy podcast. But here in this household, when there was Kings games, my good friend Malik would mosey on over from No Hezzy podcast, and he'd find his way in my room some nights, and we'd be watching games together. When there were Laker games, Lakers had just gotten Lonzo Ball. Malik is a Lonzo Ball stan by his own admission. We had just drafted De'Aaron Fox for the Sacramento Kings, the ball stopper at that time. So I mosey myself on over to his room and watch some Lakers games with him, and it was very interesting. So as people who were ignorant to the fact that one day this person would come and help destroy our team with a smile on his face, I was the first person to point out to Malik. I said, "Why is Lonzo Ball bringing the ball up court and then passing it and going to the corner. And I remember him saying, that's just the offense that they're running right now. That's what Luke got us, like he's probably, it's probably going to take him a little time to get the Warriors things going. So, they just kind of they're trying to implement what Luke wants, but that's kind of what they're doing right now. I was like, well, that happened on multiple possessions. I just want to make that clear. He didn't think anything of it. A few weeks later, seeing the same thing, Lonzo's not performing as well. That's partially on him, but the team as a whole does not look like they're really trying to run what they were running in Golden State. And it doesn't look like it's just because they got young Brandon Ingram and all that stuff. Looks like that's just not what's happening. And it looks like taking the ball out of Lonzo Ball's hands is like the worst decision that you can do with the performance that he had just had back in college, and then him just being your primary ball handler and one of the best passers in the NBA at that part with some of the best court vision. Schwab, were there any games that you watched while Luke was a head coach of the Lakers, and what were some of the things that you saw?
I mean, here's the thing. From the get-go, and I know any Lakers fans will be listening to this will probably hate me saying this, but from the get-go...
Good, let them.
I know, right? And the way I say it might sound stronger than what I actually mean or feel, but like it felt like it reeked of desperation for the Lakers to sign Luke Walton. He was... Now, I'm not going to deny his name was the hottest commodity name on the market at that time when he was no longer going back to the Warriors and he was going somewhere else. But it didn't seem like the Lakers needed somebody for the roster that for the roster they had constructed at the time. And I think, like I said earlier, hindsight, it's one of those things. I think we all wondered if Luke could do it, but we weren't sure. And I think it took some time. There was definitely moments where I would watch games and you just weren't sure what was going on. You weren't sure, and I don't mean just the play calling, but the rotations. There was times when Brandon Ingram just wouldn't be in the game, or Brandon Ingram would be having a decent game and then all of a sudden he's just not playing anymore. Or who was the backup, the power forward?
Luol Deng?
No. Larry Nance. Larry Nance would have these moments where like he would do very well, and then Luke would go and sit him right back on the bench. It's funny. I know I'm getting ahead of myself right now, but one of the main takeaways for me with his Kings tenure, even that like frustrated me, is not so much even the play calling, because in today's NBA, like there's not much play calling going on, or at least they're given options. The point guard's given options of what they want to run. I saw the same thing from back then. It was those substitutions and those lack of substitutions and lack of timeouts being called. There was multiple Laker games where they would be keeping up with the teams they were playing against, and all of a sudden the other team would go on a run, take a 10, 15-point lead, and Luke still hasn't called timeout to stem any of this progress. And it's more burned in me right now because I've seen it more recently with the Kings, obviously, but that is definitely one of those moments I remember seeing back then. Was like the lineups are horrible, and like the substitutions are horrible. And I think I even talked with Black Mo about that back then too. Was the players never knew what to expect or what that lineup was going to be. I think Josh Hart even was another the guard version of Larry Nance almost, where like you could tell that was what they needed in the lineup right now, and Luke Walton just wouldn't put him in. Or like he had a good first half and you never saw him in the second half. So I think that's definitely something that stood out to me the most about him being with the Lakers, was those lineups and the substitutions were just mind-boggling sometimes.
I would absolutely agree. So those are things that we were seeing during his tenure there with the Lakers. Now, I guess we can go and we can take a look at the record if you'd like to, Schwab, if you're able to pull up the Lakers record that first year, because obviously that following year, someone came along. The Lakers and the Golden State Warriors series were still going on. The Cavs and the Golden State Warriors series is still going on. Of course, we have some unfortunate, kind of issues, injuries, and whatnot that affected the Golden State Warriors that had happened at that time. But LeBron James, triumphant, brings yet another ring to Cleveland and makes a decision that he is taking his talents to Venice Beach.
No, see, that will never get old for me. For the record, here and taking my talents to somewhere, that will never get old.
It will echo in the halls of infamy eternally. Okay,
Yep.
but so here we are. LeBron James decides that he will bless Los Angeles County with his presence and take them out of the sunset phase of the Kobe Bean Bryant era. Rest in peace, Kobe Bryant. On into a new era of dominance, winning, and a return to form as a dynasty. And Luke Walton has the pleasure of inheriting the king, aka the coach killer. But this is not a coach that needed to be killed because he was damn sure doing that himself. Schwab, were you able to pull up the Lakers' record in his time with a similar situation as the Kings had? You know, lottery picks, young talent waiting to be shown the way to win.
His first season, he was 26-56 at
Good.
the helm of the Lakers. I mean, even we as Kings fans haven't seen that kind of futility in a while. So, but I digress. Second season was a decent uptick. I think that also was attributed to Lonzo Ball being a year older, Brandon Ingram being another year older. All these guys kind of just coming into the NBA. The third year with Mr. number 6, Mr. number 23 himself, LeBron James, only went 37-45. Only a 2-game uptick from the previous season, and only a 10-game uptick overall from a 26-56 season.
Good
And
Lord.
obviously, that's not what you want with, you know, arguably the greatest player of all time coming onto your roster and bringing all of his homies with him. You know, it seemed like he was pulling everybody out to come play for this team. Um, I I always laugh and come back, and I always want to talk smack to the Lakers fans that I know about those years that like they were just the hype and everything, and it's just like even then Luke Walton couldn't do anything with that team, and it's funny because like when you think about it, like that was or those that was the closest thing to like a team that needed a players coach because LeBron is your offense, and LeBron pretty much
Yep.
is your head coach as well. You know, a lot of
Hmm.
times he's the one running the show and running the plays, and we still didn't see success. You know, where all Luke had to do was guide them a little bit, and he couldn't do that. You know, he couldn't get that done in that time with the Lakers, even with all that extra he had. I'm just saying these comments, dude. I know there's a couple people that are gonna be listening to this that I'm gonna get some text messages later that might be filled with some vitriol and some hate because of what I'm saying. But whatever, I'll bring it on. You know, bring on the hate.
Bring on the
Hate,
hate.
hate, 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 hate,
Hate,
hate.
hate, 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 hate. Hey, bring it on. Now, something important to point out here, and thank you, Schwab, for reminding me. Even though I was looking at the numbers, I had forgotten that it was actually 3 total seasons he was down there. I was thinking that it was just 1 year and then Braun came, but you're right. It was 2 seasons of mediocrity with with some lottery picks and an upstart team, and
Let's
then
okay. Let's
actually
be
not even
very
mediocrity. Yeah, it's my fault.
let's be very clear. There was a time when these Lakers fans were trying to convince themselves, okay, that the squad of Lonzo Ball, Josh Hart, Brandon Ingram, Kyle Kuzma, and
Larry Nance.
Larry Nance was the future.
Yep. Oh, and Big Jew is down there too. Julius
Yeah,
Randle.
there was
Yeah,
somebody
he
else I
he.
was
That
missing.
was the year after he broke his leg, I believe.
Now
Yeah.
given. I will
Yeah.
give them, you know, these guys definitely come into their own on their own new teams. But let's be very clear. Even with the greatest coach of all time, that team wasn't going anywhere back then. So let's not try and hype that up like Luke Walton was going to take this basement dweller team into something special.
Exactly. If anything, the team was officially capped at that point or kneecapped, if you will, by Luke Walton's lack of talent and natural knack for coaching, let alone his IQ for the job. But he inherits LeBron James. The record is, as Schwab stated. It is important to point out that, yes, LeBron James sustained what seemed to be like his most important and harmful injury at that time. There was, I believe, some groin strain that had happened, that had occurred during a game, and ultimately he had a core muscle injury, groin type injury that kept him out for an extended period of time. And it is true that in that time the Lakers struggled. Now, if Luke Walton was worth half of his salt as a coach, I would say those losses would have been at least a third of the losses they would not have sustained, if not half of them. But he proved to be who he is. He is who we thought he was. And even after inheriting LeBron James and almost being the coach that LeBron James could put his hand up his back and puppeteer, I mean, I would say Frank Vogel is that much better of a coach than Luke Walton. But at the same time, Jeannie Buss drank the Luke Walton Kool-Aid. She loved Luke. He probably felt like he was part of the family. I understand why they made the decision. That does not negate the fact that it was a dumbass decision. And ultimately, Lucas, a.k.a. Poopy Lukey, a.k.a. Puke Walton, ends up finding a can to get projectiled into. Now we come over to the Sacramento Kings, who at that point in time had just finished winning the most games that they had, I think, since, what was it, the 20... Was it the
2005, 2006 season?
2005, 2006 season, right before we sunset Rick
Verify.
Adelman. I think all of us Kings fans know it intimately enough, but feel free if you need to. If you don't want to, we don't need it. But Coach Dave Yeager does something that we've never seen Luke Walton be able to do, which is make an adjustment. He goes from trying to run a grit and grind, high post offense team with DeMarcus Cousins that he had brought over from the Memphis Grizzlies to Sacramento, tries 2 seasons of making that work with as many players as Vlade Divac could wrangle to and talent to put around him, including Mr. One of my favorite people, because I just tweet this after every Kings game at this point, and sometimes randomly, just to remind everybody, Rudy Basketball Hell Gay himself, Mr. Rudy Gay. Let's not forget Darren Collison also came in for a stint, and we even had Rajon Rondo. We rented him for a year so he could use DeMarcus Cousins as an assist puppet to find himself another contract and another team to play for. Dave Yeager makes adjustments from that style of offense to having a younger core. DeMarcus Cousins getting traded away. Buddy Hield coming in. We get Tyreek Evans. We also got the other guy who's Langston Galloway. Let's not forget Langston Galloway.
Please do not make me sit here and try and think of all these random guys that we've had over the years, because there are some names that just don't need to be spoken ever, ever, ever again. Right?
And I'm committing a cardinal sin by speaking them, but Schwab is absolutely right. These are people that have come and gone, and we've forgotten for good reason as Kings fans. Nonetheless, we skip buying all of those jerseys. DeMarcus Cousins gets shipped off. We've got De'Aaron Fox now. We got George Hill comes in. We get a litany of other players that we also don't need to name. And Dave Yeager actually changes his whole offense. He goes to a more up-tempo, fast-paced, utilize as many possessions as you can. The more shots that we got, the better type of offense, and kind of lets the defense be what it is. And we get 39 wins out of that season. Am I correct?
Yeah, I believe it's 39. They didn't have the newest season because Luke Walton's been our coach for 2 full years, and then this is his third.
His third year, correct? Right?
Yeah. So I was looking at something, but yeah, 39 wins was the last year for Dave Yeager.
Yep. And 2 of the last games we didn't even really try to win, to go ahead and cap off, ourselves maybe at 40 or even 41 wins to end at 500. Pretty much just sold those games out. We because there was some friction, aka a coach being a coach and just yelling at his players when they do dumb things, but also yelling at them at a few times at the wrong times and discouraging their confidence, as if we any of us thought that that could happen to Buddy Hield. Vladi Divac, in his infinite wisdom, meaning no wisdom at all, gets rid of Dave Yeager, sees that Luke Walton, his Laker alumni, is on the move, and says, "Hey, you know, we got they're a super team. They're just young. We just need a coach that can that can just that they like. So they don't want to leave excuse me. So they don't want to leave Sacramento because we're bringing these guys here. And part of our issue is the talent that does come here when we rarely find anybody in the draft that we actually develop. But when they do, well, now that we have them, we don't want them to leave. So let's just get them a guy that they really, really like." And Luke Walton Waltons into Sacramento. Schwab, what were your thoughts? One, after Dave Yeager got fired, and then two, once you found out who his replacement was going to be.
The Dave Yeager getting fired wasn't nearly as bad as the day I found out Mike Malone got fired, because I
Through that.
was literally driving to the happiest place on earth, being Disneyland, and I got to the happiest place on earth, and I became the most unhappiest boy on earth once I found out Mike Malone was fired. Dave Yeager was one that I didn't necessarily think should have happened, but by the same token, I wasn't mad that it happened, because we were showing promise, but I mentioned something earlier, and it goes back to the veteran and D-Bay starting with the Golden State Warriors. I 100,010% believe the Luke Walton hire was strictly because of this random hard on that Vivek Ranadive has for the Golden State Warriors. And I think the fact that Vladi Divac had played against Luke and has known Luke. Luke's been a basketball kid his entire life because of his father, and he's been around the NBA his entire life. I think Vladi Divac felt comfortable to let Vivek Ranadive strong arm him into hiring or bringing Luke Walton aboard with Vivek's whole crusade to make us the Warriors, East.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That is one of the few hills that I will gladly die on. I truly think that was what was going on behind the scenes, because I don't think was I excited to have Luke Walton. Sure, anytime you get a new coach, like, you're always going to be excited, and you're at least going to try and show your enthusiasm and put on that smiling face of, okay, it's gonna get better, and and then just to get smacked around and kicked down and beaten down to the same place that you've been for all these years. But I truly think that I think the Luke Walton hiring was done based on not a whim, but the Vec having just a hair up his ass and just wanting to, you know what I mean? Like, oh, we got to get Luke Walton. He's available. Like, he's the hottest coach. You know what I mean? And he knew him from the Warriors days. Like, we got to have him as the coach. And I don't think he took into or they took into consideration of what they would need to lead this team of young guys. And you said, you kind of said it with Dave Yeager, he changed his style of play to better accommodate. Maybe something went on behind the scenes. Who knows? We never knows what really happened. It seemed like, at that time where I was working at that time, Dave Yeager was involved in the community, and our business was creating a beer for Dave Yeager. We had a beer coming out in Dave Yeager's name and everything. And then literally a month later he was fired. And, it was definitely interesting to see. And that's why I think, like, it was more of like, just a random moment. That's why Luke Walton, always available. Like, we got to get him. And I think Vivek definitely, I've been saying it for years, that he overstepped his bounds as an owner. But again, it'll always be pleading the fifth will always be, the way to go with that one, because we'll never know how that ever went down or what Vivek was actually really thinking and what he wanted. So
It is very true, but you know, you've been on to that whole notion of Vivek Ranadive was a minority owner for the Golden State Warriors, as he is a you know, kind of dot com boom, Wall Street software, you know, developing engineering guru who made his billions, you know, based off of that financial software that he did develop for Wall Street. Of course, brought his talents over to Silicon Valley, you know, found success there as well, continued to develop. And with him living out in Silicon Valley, him, you know, having a love for basketball since, you know, being younger, coming over from what was, I believe at the time called, I can't remember if it's Bombay or Mumbai, and I apologize for that. But coming over from here and, you know, kind of being one of those rags to riches, you know, success stories, he enjoys it. He sees the Sacramento Kings, you know, in peril, possibly losing the team. Decides that all of the excitement that he felt with the Golden State Warriors, you know, being a minority owner over there, seeing the Steph Currys, you know, seeing the, you know, going from Mark Jackson to the Steve Kerrs and, you know, and all of that stuff. He wants to recreate it in Sacramento, buys the team, and like Schwab said, hires the coach who Mike Malone was an assistant coach at that time over there, hires Mike Malone as the coach before he hires his GM, and thus again, you know, kind of kickstarting a whole negative cycle of doing things out of order for the Sacramento Kings franchise. But of course, we knew that, and we had heard around the time that DeMarcus Cousins got traded, that Vivek Ranadive really, really liked Buddy Hield. He saw the fast release. He saw the prolific three-point shooting and decided that that was going to be his version of Steph Curry. So, of course, then again, him, trying to change his current wife, you know, into the mold of his ex-wife, thinking that he could, you know, recreate all of the positives and none of the negatives himself here, over in Sacramento. And, of course, with him knowing that Luke was over there, and letting Vlade try his style of coach, it not bringing the success that we all expected, but especially Vivek suspected, possibly overstepping his bounds again and saying, hey, Luke's available. Luke came from Golden State. Golden State knows how to win. Let's get Luke. And then Luke ending up over here. And, of course, with Alvin Gentry also having been an associate head coach over there before Luke, Alvin Gentry, after being jettisoned from New Orleans Pelicans, finds himself over here in Sacramento as associate head coach. So ultimately, yes, we see a continued theme of Vivek Ranadive trying to recreate the success that he experienced in Golden State, but he did not concoct. He did not build over in Golden State, and we've seen him tripping over his feet to do so ever since then. Now, let's fast forward a little bit, Schwab. It is Sunday, November 21st. Now let's go back a few days. Sunday, November 19th, 2021. Luke Walton has found a way to collect two different 9-game losing streaks in his previous season. Somehow finds dirty pictures of someone from the Kings organization and inspires them to allow him to keep his job at least for one more season, the 2021 to 22 season. Monty McNair goes on record in the media saying, this is my guy. We believe we can win with Luke. Yeah, things got a little rocky, and we've talked about that. But towards the end of the season, we strung together some pretty serious wins while De'Aaron Fox was out with COVID-19. And then we bring ourselves to losing by almost 30 points to the Toronto Raptors. Do you remember what the vibe was in Sacramento at that time, just 2 days ago when that loss happened?
It's funny. I recently just got a job, and I've been working, so I haven't really been paying too much attention to when games are going on. But I have one friend that will text me, and the only words he had to say were, "Kings are so doo-doo." And I immediately thought to myself, there must be a game on right now, and we must be losing. And let me tell you, when I clicked onto whatever app it was on my phone to go and look and see what the score was, I I honestly was just disgusted. And this was the first time in years that I have been disgusted I think we were down at the time when I looked. It was, I believe it was 79-49. We were down
Yes.
30
Yep.
points. And I remember thinking to myself, like, okay, like you down 20 or like 18, like I've seen crazier shit happen, like I've seen. But then I started thinking to myself, and it was like, these things shouldn't still be happening. And they keep happening. And I ended up saying, I said it to my buddy. I was like, maybe we've joked around like, oh, maybe I'll turn the game on and they'll turn it around. And they just needed me to watch the game. They turn on. So I turned the game on for 2 seconds and nothing changed. And it was still a 30-point game. And I just thought, yep, I'm done. I don't want to watch this anymore. Like, I wasn't even excited to like see the next game or anything like that. And yeah, it was definitely tough to see and tough to reconcile with.
Oh man, so tough. And I'm up here. I'm recapping every single game, so I am.
You're a better man than me.
Hey, I'm a crazier man. Let's say that to feel the need to want to do this, but at this point, even myself, I'm kind of losing interest. Sometimes I'm like, I got to shut the game off, finish watching in the morning, and then just do the recap then, or I'm gonna be folding laundry while I watch this game because, like, like the terrible starts in the first quarter to continued third quarter woes. Defense only raising, 10 positions. We were 20th in defensive rating early in the season to, start coming back down to earth and reality and being 25th and 26th. And just seeing so many of the same things, I was starting to lose interest also. But what kept my interest is this Kings community, going on Kings Twitter and some of the things. But I just remember coming off of that road trip where everybody expected us to go 3-1, and we came off that road trip 1-3 with losses to the San Antonio Spurs, who aren't even trying to win. Bless Greg Popovich's soul. The Oklahoma City Thunder, who obviously aren't trying to win, with Sam Presti trying to collect all the picks like Pokemon cards to slap down the meanest deck
So
that someone could.
got the guy trying to get the major gauntlet going right now.
He's trying to get his Thanos on down there. Get six of the meanest, lottery picks, in all of the drafts to get all of the players, and then only winning a game to one of the worst teams in the NBA, the Pistons, and then going to Minnesota, going up against a team who is kind of in the same position allegedly that we're in, just trying to claw into the play-in and maybe get a playoff appearance, but just trying to claw their way into the play-in with the Timberwolves, with Anthony Edwards, D'Angelo Russell looking like he's a little healthier, and Karl Anthony Towns looking like he's starting to return to form, and then just getting smacked over there. We get off that road trip 1-3. And King's Twitter just melts down. Players are trying to trade De'Aaron Fox for Ben Simmons. Some other people are trying to, think about Fox and Tyrese Halliburton, for Ben Simmons, or trying to package Buddy Hield and De'Aaron Fox for, Pascal Siakam, and, just all of the, like, King's Twitter is just losing their mind. They want to trade everybody except for Davion Mitchell, who, as excited as I am about his defensive potential, he had been struggling so bad in that game, only shooting 23% from three, not getting into the paint very much, and being very inconsistent in his offensive output, although remaining, like with that dog mentality throughout games. And not getting whistles, blowing his way when he is cutting off guys and trying to get charges and making high IQ defensive plays. Still not showing that he needs to be the one to run our offense. Tyrese Halliburton, as much as I appreciate his game, him still passing up on so many shots, not being aggressive enough, and ultimately only averaging, I think he's like at 16 points a game. Oh, no,
Definitely
no, no,
have.
no. It was lower because he was at 13 points, and I think he's at 12.9 right now.
He's definitely having that sophomore slump this year for sure.
Yep. Yeah, and this is his first year starting starting the season as a starter as opposed to working his way some of those stats he was getting from against second unit people and then working his way into the starting role. So taking over some of those good performances as a bench player and then his stats kind of looking like that at the end of the season, shooting 41% from three and whatnot. But people are just losing their mind and trying to make all the wrong moves. We need more wing depth. We need this. We need that. But people rightfully so calling for Luke Walton's head. I have attended games and I have heard and seen the booing of the team. And then in the last 3 home games, you not only the booing, but you start to hear the chants, fire Luke Walton. You have people in the post game recaps chanting loud enough for the mics to pick up fire Luke Walton. And then last night, again, the loss against the Jazz, I'm up here watching the game with a friend, and there's literally a guy that just had a makeshift sign, just a marker and some white paper, fire Luke Walton, right there for the camera to see. And we wake up this very morning, and that is exactly what happened. So rest in peace to Luke Walton's time as a Sacramento Kings coach. 2019 to 2021. Now Schwab, here we are. He's gone. Unfortunately, I mean, there's no other way to do it with it being so sudden. Alvin Gentry is the interim head coach, which is also not what I wanted. The offense will get a little better. The defense is going to get a little worse. The wins will not improve. That's Alvin Gentry's, with the exception of his time with the Suns, I'll say that's been his recipe most recently. Even having Anthony Davis and DeMarcus Cousins for about a year before he got injured, because he had half of a season and then a little over half of a season. Anthony Davis down there, them doing nothing pretty much in that time. Monty McNair not having the foresight to fire Luke Walton before the season gets started so he can pick the coach that he wants. The coach can pick his coaching staff. They can install their systems and have a training camp with the players going in fresh with that new thing. It looking like possibly the Mike Malone season all over again. Get rid of Mike Malone. Ty Corbin comes in, uses the Sacramento Kings as an outdoor stall, as an outhouse, and then them having to bring in Old Faithful, George Karl, to try to rescue the season. Alvin Gentry's running the team right now. Schwab, I just want to get to it. Who do you think? 2 things. 1, who do you want as the Kings head coach going forward? And then 2, who do you think the Kings can realistically get?
I will start off by saying I couldn't even begin to say who would be a good choice, only because I haven't been following basketball enough to know all the assistants and things like that, because there's a lot of new assistants that are up and coming, and like even ex-players and things like that. I'm not even sure who's on what roster anymore. My wish list, though, if I had to have at least a wish list for a coach, we have players that are good. We have players that are so-so, and we have a couple of great players. What we need is a coach that you mentioned something real quick. I want to touch on this because I think it is pertinent to it. But you talked about we talked about Monty McNair. Didn't get to hire his coach. It felt like there was a comment that De'Aaron Fox made at the beginning of the year, was that he had faith in Luke Walton. The players had faith in Luke Walton. I really think Luke Walton was kept around because De'Aaron Fox, the face of the franchise, that stud player, came out and said something. And I think because of him being that player for us, it carries some weight, and I think they thought to themselves, okay, we'll give it a little bit to see what goes on. But I think and I think as Kings fans, even I said, you know what? De'Aaron Fox has been our guy for multiple seasons now. I'm going to give him this one. If he wants to keep Luke around, cool. I don't agree with it. I think they should have changed the coach, but I'll let them have another season. Me and everyone I've talked to all said at the end of the season, if Luke Walton is not gone, I'm done. I'm done, because it's the same thing over and over again. It's best case scenario that it has now happened sooner than what I anticipated happening. But for my future coach, I want somebody that knows not any particular offense, but knows how to run an offense through players and knows how to maximize those skill sets so that I don't ever want to see Buddy Hield bringing the ball up the court ever again. Not that it happened too much this year, and I think Buddy even made a joke in a post-game press conference a couple weeks ago about how he shouldn't be dribbling the ball. He should be shooting the ball. The ball should never be in his hands. He finally had some, oh, I'm realizing this now. I should never be dribbling the ball, which I thought was kind of a comedic moment. Like it was more of a duh, like we've been saying
Right.
this for years. But I think we don't, like I've been saying, I've been preaching, we don't need a player's coach. We don't need that hands-off coach. We need we need we need pop 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
We need pop 20 years ago with a young roster that he was molding into his style of basketball and everything like that. We need that I don't like saying it like this, but we need that drill sergeant. You know what I mean? We need someone to come in and hold these guys accountable. The scenarios I always come back to, we always have a decent game against the better teams. We always play with some hustle and some heart against the better teams. We always seem like we're ready to go against these better teams, but then we always end up losing these games to this year Spurs and only scored 97 points against the Timberwolves. I mean, these are inexcusable things. Yeah, the Pistons let us, get back on track. You know what I mean, with a victory. But like, these are games that we should be winning, and I need a coach that is going to come in and hold himself and the players accountable and get them ready to win those games that they think they can lollygag through and they can just they can AFK through. Oh, we're playing the Timberwolves tonight. Like we can just waltz through this one. It's not the Trailblazers or it's not the Lakers or it's not the Warriors or whatever. And that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a coach that will come in and will expect more. I felt like, not to say like any coach doesn't expect more, because obviously every coach expects more, but it never felt like in any post game press conference that Luke Walton cared that they lost the game. You know what I mean? It never felt
No, it
like that
didn't.
sense of urgency was there that they needed to. Or you might hear him say, "Oh yeah, we didn't execute tonight." Like, well, no shit, you didn't execute tonight. Like, I wonder why they weren't executing tonight. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
there's somebody called a coach that gets people and teammates and teams to execute plays and execute situations and things. And so,
Right.
not to say I don't want to bash. I keep bashing on Luke Walton because, like we've said, it's that time is done and over with. We moved on. We have Alvin Gentry now as the coach, but I do think he had his moments where we needed him for something, but at the time it had run its course. Like it had definitely run its course, and it was time to move on from Luke Walton.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you talked about the situations with like the timeouts, him not calling them at the proper time. And in addition to like another way that he would waste timeouts, he'd pick the worst times to, do coaches challenges, and his coaches challenge success rate had to be one of the worst in the NBA. I have not seen him win very many of those, while seeing multiple players, or multiple coaches, win them against our team because
I had a buddy
you
bring that up to me, and I started paying attention to that more, like watching the games. I was shocked by like how like there were certain plays where like it was clearly obvious, and the player was advocating that it was the wrong call, and we wouldn't get a challenge, or
right.
just like, or even like you mentioned, kind of like just like going back to like what I was talking about with this time with the Lakers and everything too, like. We saw those same things, like the horrible rotations and just the very basic not calling timeouts when timeouts needed to be called. Like, I remember watching multiple games on Discord with my buddies. Like, I'd be streaming it so they could see a nice HD version of the game, and we would all be screaming, "Call timeout! Call timeout! Call timeout!" Yeah, and nothing would happen. There would be no timeout called. So I'm here for the better days. I'm here for the I'm I'm very interested. I didn't expect to have you ask that question of who I wanted as a coach or who I would want, and it's funny thing about that. It's like what I said I wanted was just it seemed to be just a competent coach, and it's just,
Yeah, you didn't want anything special. You just wanted a
I didn't
competent
mean to hate on the
coach.
man, like hate on the previous coach that much. Like I didn't mean I'm not the kind of person to be doing that, but I want somebody to just come in and like actually feel like they have the team under control and that I just want to feel like that we're getting better, we're progressing. You know what I mean? We've been in the same rut for so many years. Like we're on par for another 35 win season. Like hey, I'm
It's
excited
true,
about that
man.
one. But yeah, I'm ready. I'm ready to move on. I'm ready to get this new, actually pick a head coach that our GM, has agreed upon and wants to coach with and everything. And their philosophies are aligned. So
Absolutely. I'm there. And, on that note, so I asked you that question. I think it's only fair to offer mine. And I will take one further after I offer mine. And then I want to hear what you have to say about mine. So it was a two-part question for you. And thank you for your answer. I'm going to say, who do I want the Kings to get? I want the Kings to get Kenny Atkinson. I wanted Nate McMillan, but we already saw what happened with when they got rid of Lloyd Pierce and ATL for the Atlanta Hawks, and then they brought up Nate McMillan and and the success that he had with the team after the fact. We talked about Nate McMillan before. Of course, I mean, and if people have forgotten, it was known that Nate McMillan was one of the people that Vlade Divac interviewed. But in the course of, finally interviewing the coaches, Elston Turner came in for an interview. And that's when I let Vlade Divac know that, hey, interview me, but something's going on with Dave Yeager and the Memphis Grizzlies, and it doesn't seem like he's going to be there too soon. We had that whole weird, national media rollout where, I guess Dave Yeager stepping down so he doesn't officially get fired. But then, like, within 24 hours, I believe, I don't think it was more than 48 hours, he was already officially the Kings head coach. So Vlade just kind of jumped on Dave Yeager and passed on Nate McMillan. Again, or personnel that we passed on went on to have success somewhere else. I'm not even going to talk about Bogdanovich right now, Monty McNair, because that still hurts, and I've already talked about that. But all of that to say this: Kenny Atkinson is who I would want as our next head coach. The Brooklyn Nets had that whole stinky situation where they gave away all those picks to get Paul Pierce and KD and was it Joe Johnson?
yeah, it was a few guys. I
Yeah, I
mean,
know it's
they've done it so many times now at this point that like I get the years mixed up because there was the
right,
whole KG Paul Pierce and who was the other one that went to go play for them? I don't even remember. Maybe it was just Joe Johnson, like those years. But I mean, even the more recent years, like what they're doing now with
right, all
KD,
over again.
Hard, and everything. Like,
Right.
yeah, it's funny. I actually kind of forgotten Kenny Atkinson existed just because like he never did anything with that team. But that's almost like one of those moments where it's almost one of those moments where you need the players coach for them, and he was that tactician that team didn't need that. They didn't need that version of a coach for that squad. It's almost like
Yeah.
if we would have flip flopped and let Luke Walton go be the coach of the Nets, we might have had better success with Kenny Atkinson, and they might have had better success with Luke Walton at the time. You know what I mean? So,
which is so funny because that's what had happened in between them swinging for the fences, with trying to form big threes. They were a terrible team. They were so horrible for so long, depleted talent. It was Brooke Lopez and no one else. Brooke Lopez doing his all-star performances and no one
yeah.
else over there. And then they hired Kenny Atkinson, and that's when and then they ended up getting D'Angelo Russell. So it was Kenny Atkinson, D'Angelo Russell. I think Brooke was still there. Oh no, they had gotten Jared Allen, and then they had
Karis LeVert, because there was a few years they were doing they were trying to do the rebuild with Kenny Atkinson being like a new coach or a young coach,
right.
bringing these guys up and everything.
Yep, and also gosh, I keep like he had the baby fro. He was baby Kobe. and now he's over in
Oh my
Washington
gosh.
Wizards. And he played good for him too. I can't
Dinwiddie?
believe. Yeah, thank you, Spencer
Spencer
Dinwiddie,
Dinwiddie.
and they
Yeah,
had
yeah.
Spencer, and they made it to the playoffs. D'Angelo Russell
Hmm.
had that All Star season. Kenny
Hmm.
Atkinson got them playing good basketball. They had Joe Harris knocking down all those
Joe Harris.
threes,
Yep.
and so Kenny Atkinson took a young center with Jared Allen. He took a sniper in Joe Harris. He took a crafty offensive player in D'Angelo Russell, and he took a spark off the bench that could also start if he needed to in Spencer Dinwiddie. Karis LeVert and his while he was younger, healthier, and was showing a lot of potential, and
He was
took them
their
to the
stud.
playoffs.
You
He
know,
was their stud.
he
Yeah,
was their he was their guy before D'Angelo Russell got there. He was the guy they were not building around, but he was the guy. He was the centerpiece, and he ended up
yeah,
becoming the centerpiece in the trades they've made recently to get
right,
these said players on these star players onto their team. I
right.
kind of like
So
that. I like that. I like that pick. It's actually an interesting name that I didn't even think about, and I would be interested to see if that's a route they would end up going. Um, very intrigued now. I'm gonna keep an eye on
yeah.
this name now.
Hey, we need a Kenny Atkinson job. He got them out the mud, and we need someone to take chicken poop and turn it into chicken soup. Kenny Atkinson proved that he could do that. Let's
He
hire him
did.
and do it again. And I think he's just an assistant on. I think he's just an assistant with the Clippers right now, if I remember correctly. So he would be available to come and take the gig. So that's who I want as the coach. Honorable mention either as an alternative head coach or an associate head coach is Steve Clifford. Obviously, defense is our problem. We need to turn that around. Steve Clifford goes to teams, and within that season, if they're not they're a top 10 defense, if not a top 7, defensive team immediately. So a little bit of the Thibs effect. He goes over there and
So this is my problem. I forget all these names. I forget all these guys that were head coaches and are back to assistant coaches now. You know what I mean? Like
right.
there's just so many of them. Like those random. I always Lawrence Frank for years.
Lawrence
Lawrence
Frank.
Frank was an assistant to Doc to all these different coaches. Like he
Right.
randomly bounced around these different organizations and everything. Um, I'm going to throw a name out there, and it's someone we talked about earlier, and he's been our coach already, but somebody that I think would actually do very well with the roster the way it's constructed now would be Dave Yeager, and I think would be an interesting. It's I know it may just be some nostalgia to the fact that like I liked him when he was here, and I thought he was
Yeah.
doing decent, and they kind of got rid of him, and it's weird. Like it's one of those scenarios where it's like it's the George Karl on the Nuggets effect, where they won 49 games, won the Western Conference.
Right. He gets coach of the year.
Mm-hmm. There's a video game that I play right now, and I follow the competitive scene. There's a team, pro team that is kind of doing the same thing right now, where like they got rid of somebody, but brought somebody that was they thought could potentially be a better fit and everything, but ended up not being. And I it's kind of those things now where it's like you kind of see that where like I'd rather these teams we have at least taken or like the Kings have taken the Luke Walton was that like oh we're hiring somebody that is potentially better than what we had or what we think could possibly be better, and it didn't pan out. It didn't work out, and I think they've done the right thing in cutting their losses, and I don't mind the midseason. I do not mind the midseason firing at all. It definitely throws the whole season into jeopardy, but I think every Kings fan at this point kind of knew we were kind of heading down that same path of least resistance and not putting up any fight the rest of the season. So I don't think too
Totally.
many people are getting too worked up over the fact that we made an in-season coaching change.
No, I'm probably one of the biggest, probably one of the biggest detractors as far as the timing, and not because I wanted it to happen later, but like if there's two best times to let a coach go. The very best time is during the off season. The second best time is All-Star break, because then you can give someone time to come in, even though they can't hire their own staff. They can at least kind of get with the guys a little bit, have a few practices as people come back and start warming up, a few days before you start playing your next game. But I will say this: at the very least, it's like less than a quarter of the season, or actually a little. I mean, a little further into it,
Usually
but
it's about third of the season.
right, exactly. Like we haven't gotten to 20 games yet. We got to get to 82. So at least it's early enough for that coach to do as much as they can when they find him. But if that's the other thing, if Alvin Gentry is going to be the interim head coach for the whole rest of the year, then you still look at the year as a burned year anyway, because Alvin Gentry is not going to do much better. But oh yeah, go ahead, Schwab.
No, I was gonna say I think I wouldn't be mad if they found somebody mid-season to take
Yeah.
over as the actual head coach. You know what I mean? I think you
Mm-hmm.
might have been getting there to that point, but I think right now with the way the team is, I think they needed to make the change first off, but this next hire has to be the right guy
Yeah.
because we are now on our third head coach for the most part, for this core. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I think Dave Yeager was kind of the tail end of this core's, or the tail beginning of this core's years.
Yeah.
But we're this next hire has to be the one, and if he's not the one, then guess what? We're doing the same thing over again because in a few years we're gonna lose De'Aaron Fox. We're gonna
Mm-hmm.
lose.
Little pause as we get Schwab back. Well, as we're waiting to get Schwab back, I will go to, we have to nail it, obviously, because otherwise we start that cycle all over again, or I guess the cycle just never ended, really. Um, I will say this: who I who Kenny Atkinson is who I want to get. That's who I would prefer to have as the coach. Who I think we're going to get, and I'm conflicted about this, but this is who I realistically think that we are going to get is Mike D'Antoni. Obviously, if you were familiar and paid attention, Monty McNair came from the Houston Rockets, and so he was there with Daryl Morey for a long time. And in his time there with Daryl Morey, one of the last coaches that they had, if not the very last coach that they had there, was Mike D'Antoni. And Mike D'Antoni, what does he do? Point guards, he supercharges them. He has that offense. He also is able to. Oh, 1 second. Schwab was texting me. Sorry about that. Let me see. I'll switch it up for y'all. We'll go purple. So yeah, Mike D'Antoni, he has a history of knowing Monty McNair because Monty McNair was the assistant GM to Daryl Morey, while Daryl Morey was the lead GM of the Houston Rockets. I think he was also there. I believe it was Mike D'Antoni that was there when Houston took the Golden State Warriors to Game 7 and then ended up losing. So they almost beat the Warriors as well. Let's see. So he also beat the Warriors, or almost beat the Warriors with Mike D'Antoni. So you have that as well, and they got, I think that was like the most wins as well in James Harden's time with the Houston Rockets. So and then of course it obviously it's obviously it's James Harden, but James Harden, that was when he was getting his MVP nods, as well as the if you take it back, D'Antoni's time with the Suns. D'Antoni's time with the Suns, Steve, oddly enough, Steve Nash got got the MVP, got his MVP years there too. So he installs an up tempo offense and then his point guards get supercharged. They have some of the best scoring years that they've ever had, and whatnot. So the history is there. The winning record as a coach is there. Deep, playoff runs as a head coach, championship experience as a head coach. Mike D'Antoni has it all, and he's available. He's on the market right now, so that would be a easy person to plug in, and I am going to reiterate that again here in just a second. Let me see if we got our guy back. Hey,
Hello.
look who came back to join
We're
us.
back.
Like
It's that
we,
I'm pretty sure it's that crappy internet I was talking about earlier before we got on.
we tried to get rid of J.R. Schwab and we just couldn't get rid of him. Internet issues and all. So Schwab, I was just letting the people know that who I realistically think we will probably get as a head coach, because there is history there from Monty McNair's times down there with the Houston Rockets.
I know who you're gonna say, right? I already know the
Daryl
name.
Morey.
Yep.
He supercharges his point guards. They go for MVP seasons after he gets there. James Harden and Steve Nash. He's got deep playoff run experience. He's got, as a head coach, he's got championship experience as a head coach, and he's available on the market. Mike D'Antoni.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's interesting because we've heard multiple times even the NBA players and executives say De'Aaron Fox is by far the fastest player with a ball in his hands in the NBA, and he can do anything. Mike D'Antoni is literally turns his point guards into gods among men.
Yep.
In multiple ways we've now seen, because we saw the passing god, and then we saw the shooting and playmaking god for years. You're doing something right when people hate you for the way you play, and you're just doing nothing more than taking advantage of the situation. And it's
Right.
literally what James Harden did for 3-4 seasons, was take advantage of the situation of A, having Mike D'Antoni as his head coach, and B, the way the rules were aligned for getting fouls and shooting 3-pointers, and more points are getting. I mean, it was a win-win for him, for James Harden in that retrospect. And even Steve Nash, those 7 seconds or less offenses are still some of my favorite things to think about. I mean,
and it was fun to watch too.
Dude,
it was exciting to watch.
I will always remember remember back in the day where it's like every team always had like one defensive stopper. They always had the one defensive guy. I loved watching Rajah Bell go up against Kobe Bryant. Like, that was one of the greatest things ever in basketball. And those were like those doldrum years of basketball too, where like nobody really cared about basketball because baseball and football were way bigger sports then, in those mid 2000s and things like that, and like early 2000s. And like some of those Suns teams were just so much fun to watch. Like, I mean, Joe Johnson for the first couple of years was their small forward, and like that's even crazy to think about, that he was their small forward for that team. But it's funny to think. I never even thought about D'Antoni as even an option. But that would be, if we ran some offense that was 10 seconds or less, I mean, that would be incredible, because we have the personnel for it and we have enough bodies for it. And even all these, it might make our random second round picks and those bench kids that we have, they know how to run.
Yeah.
But one thing they know how to do is run the court. Yep. So maybe we just throw them out there and tell them run the ball. You are literally running and taking the first layup or first, open opportunity you get, because we're just going to outscore people. And I might be on board with that. You're going to have to convince me with a few games, but I might be on board with that.
I mean, it's not the pick that I want, but the thing is, I'm thinking of like all the aspects. I'm thinking about availability. D'Antoni's available. I'm thinking about relativity. Like Monty McNair and Mike D'Antoni know each other.
Mm-hmm.
You know, from when Monty McNair was there. I'm thinking about, you know, what you said. Like, we have the fastest guy on the court with the ball in his hands. Like, and not only that, like, he's good at attacking the rim. Like, just tell him attack the rim, you know, and just and get the space open for him to do that, and he can go and he can do that. You were talking about taking advantage of the rules. The rules have changed. It's not, you don't draw fouls as easy anymore. It's more like the 90s. You got to go for the bucket. Well, De'Aaron Fox finished, like, De'Aaron Fox wasn't, he had just started to learn how to get calls last year, but the previous 2 years he wasn't getting calls, but he was still one of the top guards with finishing around the cup.
Yeah,
You know, with like, so all of those things in there. And not only that, then there is a nostalgic, well, there's another thing. The Kings need an excited brand of basketball to watch. And the last time we were exciting to watch was when Dave Yeager was here and he was running an up-tempo offense. People, that's why, part of the reason why people want Dave Yeager back. And I want to take a second to say prayers up for Coach Dave Yeager, battling cancer right now, you know, taking time away for that. You know, prayers for and comfort for him and his family. Thoughts and prayers with y'all. But, you know, that was the last time. So Mike D'Antoni would bring that. And then you take this. Yes, we want to see better defense, and Mike D'Antoni would not bring that. I mean, maybe if you give Mike D'Antoni the stipulation that Steve Clifford has to be on your, you know, your coaching staff, then
can't have
maybe
one without the other.
yeah. Now we're attacking it from both ends, but fans are tired of seeing this brand of basketball. Fans are booing. They're not buying tickets. The arena is not even half packed. Mike D'Antoni and that type of exciting basketball would bring all of those things back, bring fans back to see him. We can say that he's, you know, all of this success. We're not hiring a first-time head coach or head coach who just came from having 2 lousy seasons and a player's coach. This is a system-oriented coach who supercharges his point guards. And the last time that we had a coach that was actually successful with the previous team, got fired, and then came here, was Rick Adelman, and he turned our whole franchise around.
He did.
And that was the only time the Sacramento Kings in the 36 years of being here were continuously successful. So again, that's not my first choice. That's not who I want to come and coach this team.
But if it happens.
But if it happens, I just see way more positives than I see negatives for it. So Sacramento Kings fans that now Schwab. Oh, okay. I'm gonna let you say something because I'm about. Are you okay?
I was just gonna say, like, I don't think they can go too wrong with this hire, even too, because I think at this point we just want somebody new. We just want somebody fresh. We just want a different face in there to see if something changes. You know,
right? And D'Antoni's a winner. He got fired after giving a good performance, you know, to the Houston Rockets. Like it wasn't the, you know, the other way around or whatever. But I'm going to take us one step further. Monty McNair is a first-time head GM. He has experience, but this is his first time running the show. He's made mistakes. We've seen the mistakes that he's made, but he's made smart choices, and we see a vision of a team and a way he wants to play. He wants dog mentality players. He wants people that are willing to defend, and he wants people that can shoot threes. But he has blind spots. And there's one person, I call him the franchise whisperer, where he goes around to bad franchises and he whispers in that bad franchise's ear and they turn it all around. I think we need to call in Jerry Rest as a consultant, as an advisor. I think it's time to break open the bank. And I know that the Sacramento Kings are short on money and have lost over $100 million. But now is not the time to play it safe. If you guys think that you're losing money and it's all, you gotta swing for the fences. So it's just that
would
time.
that would be an interesting thing if they decided to go with that route like that. That would be definitely interesting if they ended up signing him.
All right, we lost Schwab again, unfortunately, but that was really the last thing I had to say and share with y'all, is that I think it's time to go ahead and bring in, I would like Kenny Atkinson. I think we're going to get Mike D'Antoni, and I think it's time to go ahead and break open the piggy bank and get Jerry West up here so he can turn this thing around. It's 15 years of subpar performances below mediocrity, and it's time to turn it around. Anyway, we went long on this one because it was a big deal, and this is a big day for this organization. Thank you so much for hanging out with us for all this time. Thank you to Schwab for coming on. You may see him a little more throughout the course of the season, but thank you, Schwab, for coming on and sharing your expertise. Longtime Kings fan and a realistic vision of what's happened with this team and what could happen in the future. I'm your boy Skip, aka Skip and Tosh. Check out Tabu Ohana for up to 45% off of office or gaming chairs. If you put in my discount code SKIPTC, SKIPTC, get an additional $40 off of that chair. TabuOhana.com, TABUOHANA.com. Don't apologize, just be yourself. Sacktown Breakdown will be back soon with another breakdown and more news, especially with Alvin Gentry's first game as the interim head coach. Let's see. And actually, I'm gonna let the man himself. Hold on. I'm gonna let the man himself come back and sign off. Give me 1 second here, Brigham man.
Be talking so much about the Kings that like they needed to get me off the air. They're like, no, we can't let this guy keep going right
now. That's what it is, Schwab. Well, I was just wrapping up. I was just saying, Jerry West. Do you have any comments before we go on the Jerry West thing?
I think right before it froze on me, I was talking just about I think it actually would be a decent option. I talked about it earlier with like the Warriors who are always poaching like random people. This would be another like random Warriors, person that we like brought in or would hire. We've done it before with like Chris Mullin was an advisor and Joe Dumars. Even now, I think Joe Dumars is still in an advisor role within our franchise. Not that they weren't good for what they did. I have no idea because we never really saw Chris Mullin and we never really see Joe Dumars either. If you really want to think about it. But I think, like you said, Jerry West has a proven record of turning these franchises around, and I think that would definitely be something. If you're going to do something like that, you need to do it now, while Alvin Gentry is there as the interim, and then use that time with Jerry West or whoever you want to bring in this role or whatever to figure out who that next head coaching hire is going to be. Because, like I said, you need to make this next one count. This next one needs to be the best one of these trash ones we've seen since Rick Adelman. So,
absolutely. So yeah, scared money don't make none. All of you investors, if you think you're losing it, this is the time to put the chips down. We saw what he did with the Warriors. We saw what he did with the Lakers. And we saw what he did with the Clippers most recently, we saw how terrible that team was. They were considered, worse than us. And he went and he turned that franchise around, and now they're tearing it back down with all their other stuff. I'll let Steve Ballmer do whatever he's going to do over there, but at least they're winning. They can sell tickets. They sell jerseys. They got Kawhi and Paul George. So we need that kit. We need to get it out the mud, and the logo, Jerry West can do that for us. Yep. And on that note, officially, we will be signing off. Again, thanks, Schwab. Thanks so much for coming and talking Kings with me, man. It was good just to talk to you, period. But I couldn't do this one on my own. I needed someone else. Because we had to tell the story. This was really the story of Luke Walton's coaching career.
It really was. And it's funny because I was up this morning about to watch football, and I got a group message from another friend of mine, and we ended up doing like a 5-way FaceTime call of all of us just cheering that Luke Walton was finally fired. So it definitely was a solid day overall today, and I think we can only look up from here and hope for the best, with this next coaching acquisition that we're about to make. So.
Listen to that, Schwab the pessimist.
Hey,
being
Schwab
the optimist
has now become the optimist these days. The tides have turned, and I think it might be turning over a new leaf.
Hey, I'll take it. As long as it's a purple leaf, I'll go with it. All right, everybody. Exactly. Thanks for joining us so much. You'll probably see Schwab again, like I said, at some point, but we won't ring his bell too much. We gotta bring him in for the big stuff, and today was definitely that. Skip and Tosh signing off here. We will see y'all next time. Peace.